All right, everybody. Let's go ahead and get the ball rolling today. So thank you for joining us. We are going to be talking about QuickBooks Enterprise versus QuickBooks Online Advanced, specifically around inventory items. This is my most favorite topic that I was, when I first came into the industry, super surprised that nobody liked talking about. But of course, I came from a manufacturing company that also was a wholesaler, and inventory was our life. So I've known inventory from day one, and it's a lot of fun once you kind of take the time. So we're going to be talking about that a lot today. Just as a reminder about who we are here at Fourlane and our formula for success. So we do a lot of services for clients, making sure that they are able to use their data to make decisions, right? A lot of clients, when they come to us, or prospects when they come to us, they don't trust their data in their system. I always say, well, why aren't you using your QuickBooks system to be able to give you the answers to that question? They say because they don't trust it. So we get clients to the place where they can trust their data. So we do that specifically by creating processes, documentation, and training, making sure that we're consistent, simple, having automations when we can, right? So that goes into custom programming. And then, of course, software management, because software changes. Things change all the time. Technology's changing. We need to take advantage of those changes as they come about. All right, let's dive on in. I can talk about, I saw a poll on Facebook earlier this week, and it said, what could you talk about for 45 minutes? And I put in there QuickBooks because that was really easy. I could talk about inventory easily for 45 minutes plus. So we're going to squeeze this all in to a 30-minute session here. Okay, so what is inventory? So inventory are parts that as a business, we are tracking quantity and value. Okay. That's really what all it is how many of this thing do we have and what did it cost us? What was the value of this part that we have? Now, we do have a lot of clients that we recommend track quantity, but they don't have to maintain value because they don't actually own the inventory they're maintaining. So as an example, we have a client that's an IT company that sources all of the computer systems, POS systems, technology, all the hardware that goes into several chains of gas stations. And so they hold the hardware in their inventory, meaning they maintain the quantity on hand and minimums of quantity, but they don't actually own those parts, right? So the corporate gas station actually owns those parts. So in that case, they're maintaining a quantity, but not a value. The value is zero. When it's our inventory in our business, then we should be maintaining a quantity and value. Okay. So where does that value come from? That value is the cost of the part that we purchased. That value is potentially building in some landed costs, things like shipping costs, freight costs, tariffs, duties, taxes, other things. That cost, if we're doing assemblies, which we're going to talk about in 2 weeks, could be, labor, overhead, non-inventory part values, cost of that we need to build in. That value also could decrease over time. So if we're holding inventory on our shelf for a long period of time, it could potentially decrease in value over time. You might see some deterioration. That's value. And then the thing that is really exciting about what QuickBooks does when it comes to inventory is that it recognizes the cost of the inventory at the point of sale. So in a lot of ERP systems, Acumatic as an example, which is another product that we represent, when they ship the product, this is when they relieve inventory and update cost of goods sold, right? The shipping transaction takes care of the relief of inventory and the cost of goods sold. The sales transaction takes care of the sale, the income, and accounts receivable. And those two, because they're two separate transactions, could potentially hit in different periods, right? So there's a true up that we have to do in ERP systems to make sure that we are having our costs in the same period that we're having our revenue, which is proper accounting. Okay, QuickBooks takes care of this for us. When we purchase inventory, this is one of the questions that I ask on interviews when people interview for Fourlane in the services team. When they purchase inventory, right, we buy it, so our assets go up. So we're going to debit inventory, and we credit accounts payable or cash or whatever, however we bought it, credit card. But it's a debit to inventory, right? Our assets are going up. When we sell it, this is a different type of transaction than any other transaction in QuickBooks, because usually transactions are double-sided. They have a debit and the credit. When we sell inventory, there's actually 4 steps. So we do a credit to sales, right? So sales goes up. Debit to AR or debit to cash, they go up. At the same time, though, we credit inventory because inventory is now going down, right? It's the opposite of when we purchased it. And we recognize the cost by debiting cost. So the cost goes up. So it's pretty neat that QuickBooks takes care of that for us. It's just that simple. A lot of times when we have people switching from ERP systems, they struggle with the concept that it's actually that simple and they don't have to go back and do this month-end reconciliation of inventory cost recognition, right? So pretty cool. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today, mostly spending time in QuickBooks Online Advanced as usual with this. We're trying to allow people to understand the capabilities of QuickBooks Online. The majority of our customer base is enterprise because we've been working with enterprise for so many years. So we want people to gain the comfort level for what QuickBooks Online Advanced is capable of doing. So we're going to go through setup of items. We're going to talk a little bit about list views. There's some pretty cool things you can do in online. Talk about the usage on sales and purchase transactions, including reorder. And then as many reports as we can get to in a 30-minute time frame. Okay, so let's go ahead over in product. So we're starting off in QuickBooks Online Advanced. I also have QuickBooks Enterprise open so we can flip back and forth and kind of get that comfort level for what we're used to seeing and then what we're going to be seeing possibly in the future if we're making this jump. So to get to the products and services area, we're here under sales. I can click on products and services. We talked a little bit last week about non-inventory parts, right? So we saw some of those come in. Today we're going to be adding inventory parts. So right away, something that's neat, you can see up top, it gives us a little bit of a warning. Hey, I have one low stock item, and this is where I can click through and see what it's talking about. Oh, I've got this inventory part, tape measure, 10 on hand, my Reorder point is 100. And I have no out of stock items right now, but it's neat that you can toggle using this quick little feature up here. So I'm going to go ahead and say new. I'm going to create a new part. So we're going to choose an inventory item. And first thing we're going to do is give this inventory item a name. So I'm just going to be really creative today and say part A. You can add a picture. We talked about that a little bit last week. I'm not going to do that this time. You can put a SKU in here. So PA 1232. This is very similar to when we are inside of QuickBooks Desktop and we add a new inventory part. We have the manufacturer's part number over here. Okay. The SKU though, inside of here, SKU to me, we say SKU, usually that's an internal term though, right? So this is my part A is what I call it, but PA 1232 is what it shows up on the tag maybe that we print out. So it is slightly different in that sense. You can show up in sales type transactions as well. Here, this is really for purchasing transactions, so just FYI. Most time in desktop, when we see something like that, like a SKU, people will either build it into the name. So the SKU will go in the name, and then the sales description will say part A or whatever the extra information is. So we have category. We talked about this a lot last week. This is similar to a header item in QuickBooks Desktop. So I'm going to add a new category and just call it parts. Okay. It's literally just a way to organize your items list. Then we can assign a default class to these items. So again, I'm just going to assign a default of parts. Normally, of course, we would not do duplicated, right? So category would not be the same as class because you don't need to put the same information in two different places. It should be something rolled up, like maybe category is small parts and then class is parts as a whole. And then you have small parts and large parts as an example of categories. Okay. Initial quantity on hand. Now notice that this has an asterisk in here because it's required. Inside of QuickBooks Desktop, you can put in your starting quantity on hand. It's also a preference that you can turn that off, right? So I can say, I want to hide opening balance fields in names and items so that I cannot put in the opening balance from the item itself. All right. But in QuickBooks Online, it requires you to put in an initial quantity on hand. So I can put in quantity on hand of 0. I can say as of the start date, say the 15th, and then I have a reorder point in here, 100. But if I left that blank, it would give me a warning. I'm going to start this one off at 0, and then I'm going to do another one with an actual initial quantity on hand so that you guys can see what that does. So coming down below here, the thing that's different with inventory parts than non-inventory parts is that you have to choose 3 accounts, right? So you have to choose when I buy it, which inventory asset account is it going to affect? So it's going to be a other current asset account, most likely. Sometimes we get creative with our debits and credits, but it's when you purchase it, this is what gets debited. When you sell it, this gets credited for the value of the item. So we have a sales description, special part A, sales price or rate. So this is just the MSRP price, right? You can have different price levels in there if you needed to. Which income account is it hitting? So again, if I had parts income, parts class, parts category, that's not an effective use of these 3 fields. They should kind of roll up. So like category should be the most detailed, part class should kind of, some of the categories should roll up to class, different classes, right? So maybe we have, again, small parts, large parts rolls up to parts rolls up to product income as an example. Okay. And then I can just copy the description if I needed to on purchasing, or I can have a unique purchasing. This cost is, again, just a stated standard cost. So I will put in there $10. Which expense account is it going to hit? So I glazed over this with the income, but with the income account, what this is saying is at the point, so on purchasing, when I purchase this item, it does not affect income, nor does it affect the expense account, okay? Neither. When I sell this item, it's going to be a debit to the income account, and it's going to be a credit to the expense account. Now, I have in here a cost of goods sold type account. I could put it to any kind of account. Again, we've had to get creative sometimes. Sometimes we put it to a WIP account. Sometimes we've put it to, you know, a expense account and not a cost of goods sold account. So we've had to get creative when we're trying to make certain things happen. But it's just to think about it is this is what is going to be credited for the value, and the income account is going to be debited for the sales price. Right, and then I can come down here and put in a preferred vendor. So we buy this from Rob's Parts. So those are the fields that we have available. You can see in QuickBooks Desktop, we've got a couple more fields. So we have item name, sub-item of, this is similar to the category, manufacturer's part number. We do have the ability to have barcodes in here. Class tracking, so similar to what you see in QuickBooks Online. We have multiple units of measure. We can do landed costs. Here's our cost of goods sold account, preferred vendor, sales, income account. We do have the ability to do alternate vendors in Desktop and Enterprise. And then of course, reorder point min and max, right? So once I get below 10, bring me back up to 100. So just a couple things that are slightly different. Just because there's more fields available doesn't mean that we actually will use all those fields though, right? So that's why we like to see like what is here, what is possible, because we might not need all those other fancy things. So I'm gonna go ahead and put in a secondary one. We'll do part B. And category is gonna go to my generic parts. Here, I'm gonna add a new one, so I'm doing what I said I should do, small parts. Then I'm gonna go to the class of just parts. Initial quantity on hand, I'm gonna go ahead and put 100 on hand as of today, okay? The reorder point, so I'm gonna put that as 50, so we should be good for a little bit. Inventory asset account will be the same, part B. Just copy that down real quick. Sales price, I'm gonna say this one's $80, and then cost here, so this really matters when I put in my initial quantity on hand, because it's gonna pick up this standard cost to provide my value. So let's say my cost is $20, that'd be good margins. And then again, my preferred vendor, I'm gonna keep it the same at Rob's Parts. So I wanna pay attention to that as well. As of initial date, quantity on hand is required. As of this date, I have a quantity on hand. I don't know why it's giving me a warning. Oh, I just decided to give me a warning for some reason right there. Perfect, love it when that happens. Okay, so now we can see down below here, we have small parts and there's part B, and we have parts, there's part A. I'm actually gonna edit part A and stick it into small parts also, just so that they're together for this webinar. Okay, so you can see on here, I have quantity on hand. It does show this in this graph. I have 0 of my part A because I didn't put any stated any beginning quantity. I have 100 of these, 50 reorder point. Now I have a quantity of 1 out of stock, and if I narrow it down to just that one, you can see it's because part A, I'm supposed to have 100 on hand and I only have 0. Pretty cool stuff there. So a couple things I want to note. When I come in here to the side, on the side of any particular item, I can go and make it inactive. So these are things we've looked at before, paste from Excel. I can run a report on this item. I can duplicate this item if I wanted to easily, start to add in more items. Of course, there's also the ability to import items, which we've looked at in previous courses. I can adjust the quantity from here, and then I can adjust the starting value. So this is what I want to focus on first. So if I come in here and I say adjust starting value, first of all, it's going to give me a warning. It says, hey, might not want to do this. I'm going to go ahead and say, got it. Thanks for warning me. Now up top here, it's telling me this is a transaction that is just for inventory starting value, right? So in QuickBooks Enterprise, it does not have a transaction specific for this. And in here, you can come in and edit. It doesn't have a transaction type specific for the opening balance, right? So you can come in here and edit things if we needed to. So I can change the quantity. I can change the initial cost. So if the cost that I set up of the item is the stated cost, but the value is not that same cost, I can come in here and edit that to like 1950, let's just say. You can change the as of date. I can also at this point add a class and a location if I have locations turned on. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add location in here just so you can see. Now I can also adjust the account that it is adjusting against. So a lot of times when we're doing opening balances in QuickBooks Online Advanced, we actually set up an account called inventory clearing, so that, because opening balance equity is kind of where everything gets lumped together. We set up a separate one called inventory clearing when we put the trial balances in. Then when we put in the details of the inventory, we offset it to that inventory clearing account. And the ultimate goal would be that inventory clearing account gets to 0 and we don't have to adjust anything out of that. But that's always the goal. That's always the goal. So anyway, wanted to point out that you can have this adjustment account, but this is the only place where you can have an adjustment of value, is that starting initial value. Okay, there's not when you go into adjust inventory, there's not a place to adjust value. So let's go to the second one, which is adjust quantity. So I can see in here, So I do have quantity adjustment. You can choose which is the adjustment account, so inventory shrinkage as an example, and I can change so quantity on hand, what's the new quantity, 80, let's just say, okay? And I can put in a class at the line level, I can put in a location here. Notice that when I set up this item, I did put a default class in, and it still keeps on asking me on these different transactions to put in a class, so it's just something to keep in mind there too. All right, and I can go ahead and say save. Okay, so I adjusted the quantity on here. So I have negative 20 parts, and you can see that there. Under the more section, I can see the transaction journal to see what is happening behind the scenes when I do that transaction. So similar to what we're used to in desktop. So it's showing me I have credited the inventory asset account, and I've debited inventory shrinkage account for $390 for those. Inside of QuickBooks Desktop, if we go in and we do an inventory adjustment, we have the ability to adjust quantity and value, which is what we suggest. Anytime, I wish they would take away actually the ability to just do quantity and just do value. We always recommend our clients to be looking at the quantity and value when they're doing this adjustment, just in case you need to fix something like a negative 0.18 value. So we want to be able to fix those and see what's happening when we're making this quantity adjustment, right? We don't have, in this, we don't have to go look at that transaction journal in order to see what the repercussions of what we're about to do is. Okay. If we needed to adjust the value of this part, it is very simple. It's just a workaround. We can come in and do a new check as an example. So we don't have to put a pay in the check because we're not really adjusting. We would come down here to, let's say, Part A or Part B, because Part B actually has things on hand, and say I needed to adjust the 80 that I have on hand from $19.50 down to $16. So I would put on here negative 80 for $19.50. I would put back on Part B for positive 80 of $16. The difference is $280, and then that would just go straight to my inventory shrinkage account. So we can still get there, right? It's a $0 transaction in a different way, but that's how you'd have to do any kind of adjustments to value. Now notice down here when I chose the item on this transaction, it did pick up my class. So whew, see that class in there. No, let me go ahead and save this so we can just see it. I don't know. Sometimes I'm just not going to save it then because I don't know why it's telling me something's not right. Love that. I ran through all of these things prior to the webinar, but during the webinar, it's like, no, I don't want you to do these things. Okay, so from this view, a couple things that you can do. So I can select these items. We just talked about you could mass assign a category before if they didn't have a category. I also have batch actions in here. So I can batch adjust quantity, right? So it's kind of nice. I can sort these columns by like quantity on hand or anything like that. And I can batch adjust quantity if I needed to. But I can also reorder. Okay, so I can click reorder. It will populate these parts onto my purchase order. Couple things to note, it did not pick up my preferred vendor. So that's something just to be aware of. They both have the same preferred vendor of Rob's Parts. I did have to add that in here. Also, it doesn't pick up the class, which is strange on this type of transaction. But anyway, just things to be aware of, right? That's what we're just liking to point out. So I can add a purchase order in here. Notice when I hover over, it's going to give me information. So I have 80 on hand. I have a reorder point of 50. So I technically don't have to order this. So maybe I'll just trash that one, trash that line. On here, if I hover over, it tells me quantity on hand. I'm completely out. My reorder point is 100, so I can come in and put in here 200 if I wanted to order more. Okay. So there's my purchase order in the system, and go ahead and close out. Now, when I come back to this screen, I'm just going to refresh just to show you guys, but it is still telling me that I'm out of stock of this particular item, even though I do have purchase orders out for it. So it hasn't quite picked up right? That quantity available. Inside of QuickBooks Enterprise, when we're looking at doing kind of an auto reorder, we don't do it from the items list. We do it from the stock status by item report in here. It tells us what we need to reorder, right? And then we can auto create POs from here. And what's nice about it is, so let's see, let's do one here. CEPE, if I order this CEPE part, there it is. Go ahead and create a PO for it. Now, when I go back to my report on here, notice that it's not telling me I need to order more of this part anymore because I already have them on a PO, right? So something a little bit different. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about our inventory reports. I've got 5 minutes here. So in QuickBooks Online, so of course at the item level, I can come in and I can edit this. I'm sorry, I didn't want to edit this. I want to push the drop down here and run the report. So I can see any kind of transactions that are related to this report. I can group it by item, by account, etc. So this one's not super exciting. And then I can go back to my report list from there. Down below, if we're looking at our sales information here, so we do have a profit and loss report, and we can do a profit and loss by item. So if I go into just my standard profit and loss report in here, I can see total columns by products or services and run that report, right? So I see all my fasteners, all my screws, services, and then total fasteners. If I go over here to parts, I've got my small parts, my part B, which is that adjustment that we did, and we have total small parts. So you can run a profit and loss report to see kind of by item. They don't have a report like we have inside of QuickBooks, which is going to be our item profitability report, right? So it's kind of just same information, different view. I got the items down the side instead of across the top, and then simplified cost revenue, right? It's a little bit different when it comes to that. We also do have reports for sales by item, right? So I would be able to run a sales by product detail or summary. So if I looked at my summary report in here, see the quantity that I sold, amount, percentage of sales, and what's the cost. So I actually didn't do a sale. I just realized that. So let me go ahead and create a new invoice for these parts so we can see what the sales looks like. So I'm going to come in here, add part A. I'll put part B first. I'll add 12 of those. And then part A, which we actually don't have any of those on hand, right? So it's going to tell me. So here now I see on hand 0, 100 on or reorder point, 200 on a purchase order. So I'm just going to go ahead and say 12 as well and save that. Didn't give me any warnings or anything like that, except for just that pop-up there that showed me that we don't have those parts. Now when I go into my sales by item report, sales by product summary, so you can see I have those small parts down below here, part A, part B, how many we've sold, and then it fills in what's my cost of goods sold, margin, and then the percentage for us. So it just fills in more fields when you're selling inventory parts as opposed to what we were looking at last week, which is non-inventory parts. Okay. So quite a bit different, but a lot, pretty simple when it comes to inventory. Not everybody needs a ton of elaborate things when it comes to inventory. Flipping back over to our PowerPoint here, I just wanted to make sure so you guys see what we have coming up in the coming weeks. So next week, we're going to talk about groups and bundles. Week after, we're going to talk about build assemblies, and then go into some of these other areas here. If QuickBooks did a crazy announcement in the last couple of weeks about desktop outright not being available anymore. So if you have questions about your licensing of QuickBooks, please make sure to give us a call. We are here to help understand licensing and make sure that we're in the right product also always to make sure we can help you, guide you if you're ready on QuickBooks Online or not as well. So just going to ask a quick question to close us out. Let me send out a poll. here. Do you currently use inventory items? While you guys are asking that, let me see. Oh, we got a lot of questions today. I'm going to stick around for a couple seconds here to answer some of the questions. And see, and if we can't get through them, then we'll make sure to get over to you after this webinar. Can inventory SKUs be warehoused and tracked in different locations? So they do have inventory locations. So you have what's called a location, right? Like you have the field called location, but there isn't really a report. So like if I were to look at parts, a part report, so like a product list, or if I look at physical inventory worksheet or inventory valuation reports here, when I customize this and filter it, right, I can filter it by product service, but it's not, location isn't available at that point. So it's not the same for sure. It says, I stated the income account is the debit. No, I'm sorry, the income account is a credit on the sale, right? When you're selling, income account is a credit. Gosh, lots of questions. How do we show inventory on hand in Germany and the US? So I just talked about that. So it doesn't really, locations isn't the same as multiple warehouses and what we have in desktop. So it's definitely not the same. You would have to use third-party app add-on to do that. Okay. All right. I hope everybody took away some cool information here. It looks like most of you guys on the webinar are using inventory, so that's awesome. And continue to send in your questions if you guys have any, and we will get over to you. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Thanks, guys.